Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Welcome back, everybody.
So we're going to elaborate a little more and go into some topics we kind of touched on in the last video. And then I think we're going to try to keep track of expanding on these concepts and going deeper. So we're going to touch on a lot of things in this one, and then we will bring back individual videos to delve really deep into each individual topic. But we want to give you kind of like an overview. We really want to try to paint that picture so that there'll be a lot of aha moments when looking at the bigger scheme of things.
Aha moments are just an absolute blast.
They are fun. So when you're looking up at the night sky, if you've been following this channel for 5.5 years maybe, since the inception, you'll have heard us at some point say that every single star you see in that sky is a being. It's somebody.
It's absolutely somebody with a consciousness, and if you can get out there where there's no light pollution and start speaking with your heart and soul, they will speak back.
They will. And many people notice this. If you look at a star, focus in on that star, and start to try to communicate with it. Send a thought out to it. You might see the colors change. You might see sparkling, twinkling, and maybe it goes from being blue to green to red. You'll see the colors change and intermingle and intermix. I've had many friends that have noticed this and say, the stars actually speak to me. Well, they will. They will. They're people. We could just say simply, they are people.
They are people with hearts, souls, and perceptions just like us.
Absolutely. When you look to spirit orbs, they're people too. They're people kind of in a transitionary phase. This experience in these bodies is pretty unique, really. When you look at all the different levels of existence out there, here we are having a very, very dense experience. Not to say that everybody is dense, but their bodies are dense. It's all energy. Everything is energy. But the physical body is vibrating at a much slower rate of speed than when we're out of the physical body.
Right. But the fact is that everything is vibration and frequency. So even though things do look solid and your hands look solid, there's vibration going on all the time. And there's movement, constant movement all the time.
And when you look at these spirit orbs, often you can see faces in them. That's because they're still retaining some semblance of who they are in their thought process. And see, we don't need a brain to think. This is all part of the distortion. The brain is an operating system, part of the operating system of the body. But when the body is no more, our consciousness withdraws from the physical shell, and it is just that. We leave that shell, and we still go on. And you could see faces in these spirit orbs. Now, these spirit orbs are pliable. They could change easier than our physical body can change. Again, we're energy trapped at a lower vibrational rate of speed than when we are in the other densities that consciousness resides in. And we are multidimensional beings. When we look to light beings, let's say beings that are on not even 5th density, but maybe 6th, 7th, higher densities, that's just their nature. Their nature. Now, they can appear in any way, shape, or form that you want to see them or they want to appear to you.
It is really important to understand that. So if you are reaching out to a being like Yeshua, like Aset, Isis, that you have an understanding of what they look like, and they will show themselves to you in a recognizable way. But you don't want to just go by looks. You want to go by that heart chakra too.
Exactly. So, if you've ever noticed that when you're in the dream world, it's very changeable. And yet we are ourselves, but we're not always ourselves. so to speak. We might be a different version of ourselves. We still have that I-ness to us, and we may encounter other people that we know in the dreamscape, but they might be subtly changed. You might know the energy of somebody, but they don't look the same. Or maybe they're even combined, multiple people combined into one. It's a more fluid existence in 4D. And this is what's happening to us now, is this transition. We have 1 foot in the air, about to land on the ground of 4D. And so everything about our reality is going to become a little bit more fluid.
And I think a lot of you have noticed that when it comes to manifestation.
And this is why, to get to the higher densities, like 5th, 6th, 7th, and higher, we have to basically graduate school. Because again, we can become so much more self-destructive and destructive of everything around us if we don't have a grip on self-realization, knowing who we are, on being able to control the lower aspects of ourselves, so to speak, and releasing that which we no longer need, that which no longer serves us. This is a big part. We have lessons to learn before we can graduate to those higher densities. And now we're going to really shift gears. First, I just want to double check with people. Make sure you guys are subscribed to both channels with the little bell clicked, Evolutionary and EEARTS. And now we're going to jump into some of the myths and legends and the reality behind, say, beings like werewolves. We were talking about vampires last time, talking about the reality of, well, Prince Charles being related to the historical Dracula, who is also related to Elizabeth Bathory, who has a very, very, very dark history, and this Order of the Dragon, and the real, actual truths upon which these so-called mythological creatures, like vampires and werewolves, are based. Interesting, we see in the Underworld series humans enslaved to the vampires, and then the humans have a chance to free themselves, and it's through lycanthropy. What's lycanthropy? It's shape-shifting. And so humans can be bitten by a werewolf, become a werewolf, and then they're on an even playing field with the vampires. They're no longer easy prey. They are something to be feared. And this is what the whole Underworld series is all about. And we see a little hints of that in the old Twilight, too, with the vampires and the werewolves just being just kind of blood enemies, so to speak. Then we see the legends of dogmen. And there's a lot to cover when it comes to dogmen and dogmen-like beings. Again, the whole werewolf legend is a fascinating thing, and shape-shifting is a fascinating thing. The Michigan dogmen, we'll go into each one of these down the line sometime in the future to cover what has happened and transpired with each one of these legendary, or perhaps there's always a root that is true when we get to these myths. In Louisiana, there is the Rougarou. Again, a werewolf type of creature that inhabits the swamps and the woodsy areas. You see here another depiction of the Rougarou. Is it just tourism and tourism dollars? Well, yeah, there's a lot of people trying to capitalize on that. But it does have a basis in fact. And in fact, the basis for the Rougarou might actually be more akin to the Skinwalkers. And in reality, there we might be talking about the same thing. And the Skinwalkers themselves are very, very fascinating subject to get on. And then we have the Ozark Howler, not too far away from the Rougarou, another mythological creature with sightings going back almost 200 years and legends that go back before that, of this mythological kind of a cross being between a a wolf, and yet it's got the horns that remind you of a ram, and yet it's got feet that remind you of a bear. What the heck is it? Yeah, exactly. What the heck is it? How about Anubis? He is a dogman of sorts, is he not? Again, there are most definitely factual basis for almost all the myths that we encounter in our world. And then, of course, we were just talking about the dragon, the Draco, and this video will get demonetized as well because we just said those things, and we'll get a little Wikipedia. But going back and covering these legends, we're going to use some of the aid of our guides to give us a little bit more clarification. We got the message when we were in New Mexico. We got the message. So this is, I want to say, a year and a half ago, we got the message about dogmen being released. Now, this came from the Galactic Federation, if I remember right. And it was a channeling that came through about dogmen were being awakened from stasis in order to prepare for the battles against the Anunnaki and the Draco.
And many times, I was talking to Mike earlier, I get this information. It just comes in this spurt of information, and I have to unpack it and really make sense of it, the information that they're giving to me. And sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes it's frustrating because when you get channeled information, they'll give you so much information and then it stops. It just stops. So you're not always able to do that thing where you want to pick it apart with your left brain and try to make sense of things, because basically when you're dealing dimensionally, you cannot make sense of things in the third dimension that are of other dimensions because the laws are simply not the same. But when we did get this information, it was in essence beings that were created to help fight the good fight for humanity, to give humanity that freedom that it needs to move forward, so that our path can be opened up and we can more freely move forward, because it definitely feels like there's obstacles in our path that really shouldn't be there. So these dogmen were in stasis, were created to actually go up against the Draco. What does that mean? That means they are some really, really highly skilled entities that can do some fighting with their minds, with their bodies, possibly even with the help of AI to defeat entities like the Draco. And that's just insane. If you could even really understand the draconian energy, it can make people very, very sick. I've seen beings on TV that really looked like they did go face to face with a Draco, and they just don't bode well, because our energy cannot stand comfortably in the essence of their energy. So just knowing these dogmens were created to go up against these energies and for assistance in humanity really already tells me everything I need to know when it comes to how powerful are they, what can they do, really what is their purpose. And their purpose is to shove aside energies that need to go so we can move forward and continue on moving into that space where there's more light, the light of information, and reattach to our higher selves.
Again, you have to recognize that we are in a interdimensional galactic war. The Earth is just one tiny little speck on which this battle is playing out. It's much bigger than us, and it extends through multiple densities. If you had to say where is the home density of this war, I would say it would have to be centered in the 4D, wouldn't you say?
I feel definitely centered, anchored in the 4D, because really, if you watch movies like Harry Potter, and you see those magic tricks that they can do, there's a lot that can be done on 4D for both good and bad, but it's in that density where we can do things that are just beyond our understanding here with some development and understanding. And it can very much go both ways, for good or for what we perceive as good and what we perceive as evil.
So I want to give you this picture. So we have two family members that we love dearly that we speak with every other week, and they're both in their 70s. And one is bedridden from a stroke, and the other one has health issues as well. We might look at somebody's physical shell and think, that's an old man, that's an old woman. And you might not think of them as being powerful. And that would be a mistake. Because again, both of these individuals have amazing light bodies. So when they are out of this physical shell and find themselves on 4th density or 5th, again, people that are spiritually developed and don't succumb to this draconian system, the AI construct, the black goo and all that, you will be able to go up to 50 if you want at this point in time. This is truly the great spiritual reset. Again, they always play everything on there's a play on words and a play on reality that they always give us. They told us, you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy. And you know what? They're right. But that's not on this planet like that. So they're saying it from the standpoint of giving us the truth, because we can own nothing and we can be happy. In the 4D, we don't really own anything. I mean, there's nothing physical to own. It might look physical, but you can manifest it out of thin air. Same thing in 5D. In 5D, it's just even another degree quicker. So you have to be very careful. You have to have developed to that point where you're not manifesting disastrous things because of leftover nasty energies that you haven't purged. You got to purge them before you could go up higher. But in 4D, we will find that we are all kind of like, we have that Harry Potter type of wizard and warlock ability. All these legends, really, when you look at all the legends of magic and magical beings, what are they really telling us? They're telling us how life is on 4D. That's our past. And that's our future. We're almost there again. When you look to the legends of, we could look to the mythological legends of the gods, and then we see in both the Greek mythos and in the Vedic worldview and in China, when we're in a golden age, man is just like the gods. We are just like the gods. We can fly. We could do all sorts of things. We have amazing powers. This is the reality behind us. And in fact, we have much more power than these lower 4th density beings like the Draco and like the Anunnaki, who are a conquered species. They were at war with the Draco and they decided, to join. And they succumbed. And they're part of the AI Borg collective. And the leadership of this planet is part of that collective. They want you to be part of that collective. It's a dead end. It's an evolutionary dead end. You're stuck. They're stuck. They can't move any higher. They are so stuck where they are. Again, we should really have pity on them in some ways. Yet they view us as ants. But they're the ones that are stuck. We can rise above them and watch them all we want. Not that we'd be too interested when you're up in the higher realms. The only reason really why those up in 5th density watch is because they want to cheer us on. But again, the reality is that all those myths and legends about magic and about all these different type of beings, these beings are real. They just exist on a density that's a little different than this one. But this one is rapidly becoming that one. So we are going to see things that were extinct that are no longer extinct. And things that were mythological are going to be factual. And the whole concept of beings lycanthropes, lycanthropy as the process of shape-shifting. Okay, Cindy's getting something now. Are you okay? Okay, so, this is part that they don't want you to understand. Shape-shifting is something that happens on 4D and above. It's just part of what anybody can do with a little bit of practice, a little bit of know-how.
You know, and again, this is going to be a whole nother video separately. It's so important to heal our trauma when we get into working with these energies. I mean, they're amazing, and we do know a couple people that are very, very good with them. And if only everyone could see the way they manipulate the energies, you would understand how and why those things that we see on Harry Potter, why they look so miraculous, because that's actually what it looks like. So, but it does take a lot of practice, and there is a lot of interference from different realms. So that makes it very important for us to learn how to cloak ourselves, shield ourselves, and that's a whole nother one.
And going back to those two entities that we were talking about, these two beautiful beings that we see every other week, you know, yes, their physical shells are getting more frail, but their energy bodies are those of really mighty warriors for the light. And so when they're out of their physical shells, they are going to be very, very powerful entities to be dealt with. And they already are now. It's just in the physical, you just don't see it as much as you will when we're all on the fourth density and then also eventually above. So with the Rougarou, if you go back far enough, you find that this legend, it's not really so much about a werewolf type being that's always a werewolf. It actually does have its origins in what we would call skinwalkers. And what are skinwalkers? Well, the skinwalkers we've had encounters with, and these are very, very real beings. There were some that were out there in New Mexico, and there were some that were in Nevada when we were staying in the deserts at night, and very, very isolated. We could sense their presence. They could sense us. We could perceive them. And they are basically, there's just somebody walking by. And, sorry, guys. The dogs are doing their job and protecting us from skinwalkers. But they are basically shamans. They're medicine men that have these abilities, the ability to become a shapeshifter of sorts. Now, that's not necessarily completely on the physical. There is something called glamoury, too, where you could give the illusion of being something other than what you are. There is glamoury that probably more people can do than you would know, where you could give the impression that your eyes are blue, but they're really brown. No, they're green. What color are your eyes? Again, this is all part of true magic. And so these shamans have the ability to adapt and take on the characteristics of other beings, such as taking on the characteristics of wolves, coyotes, or mountain lions.
Mm-hmm. So just to bring you back a little bit to kind of try to understand these energies a little bit. If you were ever, that's a silly thing to say. When you were little, if you ever thought about a cat or a dog or a horse and called in and just pretended you were a cat, a dog, or a horse, and just take it on some of those qualities. Maybe when you were little, you would be like acting like a little kitten that was purring. You take on these kind of energies of these entities that you admire and you care about. Well, these entities do it on a whole nother level in an extreme way. And again, these are ones that it is very difficult, again, to hold your own frequency when you're around them, because it is very, very disturbing. So there is a scale to everything. There is no black or white anything when it comes to the world of spirits. Everything has a scale. So important to keep that in mind so that when you're feeling certain energies, you know to shield yourself or sage or get away. But yeah, these are energies that we found it very uncomfortable to be near.
Absolutely. And, I was thinking, geez, we could dig up some photos that are not for the squeamish, where we found dead rabbits that Sassy used to love to go out and chase, but she would never really catch them. And they had holes cut into them, perfectly round holes, every organ removed, no blood anywhere. We've also encountered things that had things that look kind of like a hybrid between something cat-like and something canine, but with the head completely removed on the path that we would always walk on. So lots of weird things that we could sense were placed there by the dark energies for dark purposes and to scare us and push us away. But, again, you got to recognize it for what it is, and the light inside you is what will protect you, and keeping your vibration high is absolutely key. But these beings are very, very real.
Right. It's really important to learn how to grow your light and to learn how to cloak yourself, shield yourself.
Yes. And so, there's always a basis, in fact, like we were talking about glamour and magic, and the fact that we are 1 foot already through, it's like we've penetrated through the 3D and our foot is in the 4D. We just haven't fully landed there yet. But you might notice time is not what it was. Time is speeding up. It's changing dramatically. Everything is changing dramatically. A lot of people can recognize that their consciousness is changing dramatically. One being that has come through before in channeling is Anubis. And Anubis is a very, very powerful, powerful being. These ancient gods of Egypt, and really you can't limit them to Egypt because they're not limited to Earth. That's the thing to get across. And so, we will have people that are stuck in a fundamentalist mindset, and it's because they want the Bible to be the literal, complete, with 0 errors, Word of God. But the reality is there are truths in there, but there's also so many lies and distortions that you got to go sifting through. And there are lies, there are distortions, there are errors, there's a million contradictions. It's been revised and edited constantly. It's just the very nature of the thing. But again, when you could do comparative mythology, you learn how to go within, then you could find your truth. But Anubis is a very powerful being that Cindy could give you more info on.
Mm-hmm. Now, Anubis could be painted in a dark way, but when we see Anubis and I read his energy, as far as him being Lord of the underworld, feeling that darkness and understanding that darkness, I think is where people get Anubis confused. Anubis is very much a healer kind of entity, and also an equalizer in sorts, where bringing justice is probably one of the most important things. Justice for when we are moving into Kali Yugas, out of Kali Yugas. Anubis will come to people and assist them in their healing work, their energy work. You really need to be in touch. He takes this dark part of the energy that we might perceive to be evil, and he uses that as almost like a righteous kind of power, a righteous energy to move things to a more balanced space. So that's how Anubis's energy comes to me. That's exactly how it feels for me to give you a personality and a persona. That's the best thing that I can explain to you is, yes, he is Lord of the underworld, but that doesn't make him bad in any way. What he does want to do is bring healing and understanding into the 3D where we're at.
Well, the thing is, too, because he's part of the natural order of things. And again, this is a battle against AI. This is a battle against the unnatural order of things. I do believe it was when Anubis came through that we got the information about the dogmen. Do you remember?
Probably.
I do think it was. It was at that same time period. I'm trying to remember exactly. But it was very much in that same time period. So again, so much of the myths and legends that we see when we look to, say, the Lord of the Rings, and so many of us were brought up with, The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy and all. You see these battles against the orcs. What do the orcs look like? Well, they definitely have a reptilian flair to them, do they not? Then we have the elves. The elves have a Pleiadian flair to them. Again, this is part of the conditioning. So I was going back to that fundamentalist mindset that wants the Bible to be the be-all, end-all, so that they know that if they have that dogma and they hold on to that dogma, they feel they're safe and it's all right. And that's why they want it to be demons and angels and not extraterrestrials. But by very definition, if something is not from Earth, it's extraterrestrial. If something is not of the 3D, it's interdimensional. It's something from a different density. So it's just recognizing the fact that, yeah, when we're talking about ghosts, when we're talking about demons, when we're talking about angels, when we're talking about dogmen, and we're talking about Draco and Pleiadians and Arcturians and everything we're talking about, we're ultimately talking about aliens and interdimensional beings by very definition. So, again, it's that limited worldview that we get from the fundamentalism that's mired in the church and in the medieval dogma, where that's a controller thing. They don't want you knowing that you're surrounded by all these other beings all the time. You just can't see them because they're not of the visible light spectrum, but they are there. When you're at a heightened sense of awareness, which can be achieved through many different things. I was in a car accident once where it seemed like time almost stopped. And I remember the windows of the car slowly imploding inwards, the car being sent in the air, and everything seemed to move just so slow. It was like you took a video and you brought it down to 10% speed. Times like that, when the adrenaline starts to rush, we might all of a sudden notice a lot more of the environment around us. There are times when people see ghosts. Well, what are ghosts? Well, there's a couple different categories and classifications. Sometimes it simply is the imprint of a traumatic event where the consciousness is no longer there, but it's kind of like a photograph that's imprinted in the environment that keeps replaying that traumatic event. It might be a car accident where somebody was killed suddenly, and the ghost of that person seen on that road time and time again throughout, maybe a couple hundred years. Or it could be the lost souls, like so many lost souls at Gettysburg right now that are still traumatized, that haven't even gotten to a normal life review. They're just still on the battlefield. They're so scarred. The controllers understand that. So these people wandering on the battlefield, they're wandering in the controller's backyard. They're on that lower fourth density. They're stuck there. They can still be utilized for different purposes. This is why there are wars and rumors of wars every single year for the last 6,000 years.
And there are ways to help these beings reunite with themselves. I think many of you have heard about soul retrieval or shattered soul, where these energies are out there and they can be brought back to their home and to make that being more of a whole, a functioning whole. The problem in lies where we can also, if we are trying to help do this, we can take on that trauma and then really not even know what happened and get ourselves in a lot of trouble. So it is information that we all have access to, but we do want to go about it in a responsible way.
Absolutely. And I'll just share with you one thing I think I've shared once before, maybe. My father, 12 years, brought up, going through Catholic school, good little Catholic boy of Mexican and Native American descent. And, he was really a devout Catholic till he got to be an adult, and then he just kind of, he stopped going all the time. And in his older years, he never went. Even when we would go at Christmas and things like that, he wouldn't go. But the thing that was fascinating, even with his background, and he and his sister and his brother, they, as little ones, they had a vision of Mary come to them. And I don't doubt that, because Mary is one of my guides. And I remember when I was 5, I would be on the side of my bed every night. And it was always the prayers to Mary that really, really touched me. And, of course, reaching out to Yeshua always touched me as well, even though I was still seeing him as the biblical blood sacrifice Jesus, which, I've recognized is not the true him. Again, he was much more the Essene teacher of righteousness that the Essenes were waiting for. Yet that same father, he told me he knew aliens were real, and he claimed to have a sighting. He didn't tell anybody else but me. And the other thing, too, was he told me that, and he just said it like on the side in such a way that he can go ahead and be a bird. He said, at night I become a bird and I fly around. And it's like, yeah, okay, Dad, sure. What you got there? That just looked like a beer. I don't know. How many shots did you have with that beer? But I knew better. No, it wasn't like that. It was something he was tapping into in his heritage. Because again, the Native American side, and we can do all sorts of these quote-unquote shamanistic things, such as shifting our consciousness into another vessel. So this is a witch and her familiar. And again, the witches were persecuted for a real reason. It wasn't that they were in league with Satan. They weren't in league with Satan per se. No, actuality, the church was serving Satan. The church was, part of Satan's grand plan, the adversary's grand plan. In the controlling of people, it was taking away people that knew the secrets, that knew how to work with the animals, that knew how to shift their consciousness into an animal. You can't have people doing these things. You can't have people with these abilities. And in today's modern age, now we have so much knowledge available to us. We can, get an idea from the DR of what's wrong with us, and then we could just look it up and say, I want to take a natural approach to this because I don't want a script. And so we could see, well, okay, what can I do for my blood pressure? Arginine and citrulline will lower blood pressure. Okay, I could definitely cut out things that are raising my cholesterol. Okay, I could exercise more often. And, again, many of these witches, they knew what herbs would work to cure what diseases. At a time when, if you went to the medical professionals, what were they going to do? They're going to bloodlet and put leeches on you. And how many people died because of modern medicine of that day?
Mm-hmm. And most everything basically boils down to some kind of emotional trauma anyhow. So if you do go to the DR and you get a script and you're just putting a Band-Aid over it, you're not addressing the problem. You really have to go to the root. And to do that takes time, because it took time for you to get to where you're at. It's going to take time to unwind things, and then you have to understand, where does that path lead back to. So all of those things, very, very important to understand.
Absolutely. And so in future videos, we'll go in a little more depth on each one of these, but we just wanted to give you a quick overview. So yes, dogmen are very, very real. There are many different types, just like we go into Bigfoot. And yeah, there are many different beings that we categorize as Bigfoot, but there are so many different types, just like humans. You could say, members of the genus Homo. But yeah, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Neanderthalis, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens, of course. They're all parts of that genus, so to speak. So, again, there's clarity that can be achieved, but the big thing is that so many of our myths and legends are based on reality and fact. And in fact, we find ourselves literally at a time where we're coming to the realization that the myths and the legends are actually transpiring all around us at this very moment.
And the technologies that we didn't think were technologies before, but we understand now, it's just a crazy world.
Absolutely. As always, guys, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.